everyone. First of all, welcome, ma'am. We are glad you are here. And welcome everyone to our online webinar about. So first of all, like yeah, as everyone have might see the topic, the public policy, like in bold it's mentioned. So I have always been fascinated by this term, like what is public policy? How does that impact? So we will be getting to know it more about public policy from ma'am. So my name is Chetan. I am a third year undergrad and joint secretary of Students Academy Board. I am honored to be your host for today's webinar. We have a
You?
distinguished speaker, Dr. Padmini Ram, who has extensive experience working on public policy at grassroots and international levels. She is an anthropologist by training and also has a PhD from University of Cambridge. She has taught graduate as well as undergraduate and professionals at universities in India and abroad. And as a TED speaker, she delivered a talk on informal economy titled Informal or Illegal Voices from the Fringe. And her research paper have been published in international Corpus Index journals. Today's webinar will provide various insights on importance of public policy, its impact on our society, and why is it really crucial for everyone to understand it. Like not only engineering background, but everyone, like every student should know. So Dr. Padmini will share her knowledge and experience to help us decode public policy. Uh, without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Padmini, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chetan. It's just that I'm nursing a cold, so if I have to clear my throat or something, it's just because of that. It's my absolute pleasure to be here. And thank you, Parvati, for extending the kind invite. And for those of you who don't know, Parvati has been my student. She was my dissertation student as well, and a very cherished student at that. And yeah, I, as a academic, I think. Sort of, like discussing with students, bringing in new ideas and bringing new thoughts, and because the age difference is often so much that invariably they're thinking along new lines, and that's very exciting for me. So I'm really, really happy to be here today. And yeah, so let's get started. Before I get started, I just wanted to know what kind of backgrounds are you from? I know engineering is one of it, but Chetan told me it's not just engineering. So I'm guessing other backgrounds as well. So
Yeah, to summarize, we have various BS, MSc students, we have MS students, we have from students from liberal arts and bachelors in technologies already there. There are many PhD students as well from
yeah.
various departments.
Cool. So sounds like you've got the job cut out for me. So by the end of about 50-minute session, if you guys can answer the question as to why all of us should be concerned with public policy, I will think that my job is done. All right. As I'm talking, I don't want to be just delivering a lecture. So feel free to sort of jump in, ask questions, put questions on the chat and everything, and I'll be more than happy to answer those questions, take it up, and it doesn't matter whether I finish the presentation that I have or not, and those things don't matter, okay? So just feel free to, feel free to ask and feel free to, question, all right? So let me share my screen for a moment. Actually, I have two screens, so yeah. Chetan was asking me for a shorter title, and by the time I got back to him, it was really late. But I'm going to be answering both those things, so don't worry about it. And yeah, so today's topic, as such, is about decoding public policy, and I just want to know if I can somebody put something in the chat so that I know if I'm getting the chat or not. Okay, I won't get it if I share this screen. Okay, so let me just share the other screen so that I get your chat, okay? This way I'll be able to get your chat. And don't think that I'm ignoring you, all right? It's just that I am going to be looking a bit towards the other screen and all of that. So yeah, that's about it. And I hope you're seeing my screen with regards to, can you see my presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
And you can hear me loud and clear?
Yes, ma'am. Clear.
All right, so let's get started. The first thing I want to do is have like a common understanding of when we say public policy, what do we mean by it, right? Because the very word public policy is very contentious, as with many things in social sciences, right? So when I'm saying, and there are many sort of terms that denote it. So in Europe, it's going to be called social policy. In America, it's going to be called public policy. The courses might be called Masters in Public Administration, even though they're studying public policy and these kind of things, right? So all of these various terminologies aside, you understand what I say when I mean public policy. So what I'm referring to here is collective decision-making process, wherein a group of people or society as a whole is trying to address the problems that the society faces and figuring out rules with regards to how they're going to solve that problem. So tomorrow, if you are going to have, let's say, extra class, and all of you, so one of your professors says that we need to have an extra class and we need to have like 10 extra classes because we couldn't finish the course, and you need to come on Saturdays and Sundays and all of that. So all of you will be really up in arms and like, oh my God, they don't have work-life balance and blah, 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 and they want to call us and this and that and all that stuff, right? But then if the problem was given to you and said that, look, this is the problem, and we need to come with for a solution together, then you would all discuss and debate and fight and arrive and say that, okay, we can have classes on Saturdays and we want to have classes on Sunday morning, but no way are we giving up our Sunday evening or something like that. And when you arrive at that decision, you know that that's the only way you could have solved that problem, because you've gone through every other scenario in mind. And this is going to take a while. It might take a week, it might take a couple of days, but the smaller the group, the easier it is, right? And this is with regards to your own time, which you have control over, fairly good amount of control over, right? But when we're talking about public resources, right, and new things are becoming public resources. So when I say the air I breathe, or the water that we drink from, or the land, the mountains, or these things, how do you define the property rights with a lot of things? How do you define property rights in space? Who sends an aircraft where? Who's clearing up the space debris? All of these things, right? So what can be the scope of public policy? That's entirely dependent on a lot of things, which includes like things like how do we define public resources, how do we define problems, and all of that. So we're going to come to that. But basically, all of us understand that when I say public policy, what I mean is the problems that we as society think of as problems. So let's say things like alcoholism. If I am a drug addict, or I am suffering, I'm battling alcoholism, it's my own personal problem, right? But if as a society we see increased rate of alcoholism or increased rate of drug addiction, then it becomes a societal problem. So study of cohorts kind of a thing, right? So that's the kind of difference I'm saying. And then as a society, we have to define it, that this is a problem we want to solve. This is something that we recognize as problem, and this is a problem we want to solve, all right? And then making rules about how we're going to go about solving them, how much money we are going to put in, how much time we are going to put in, how are we going to, what are the steps in resolving that problem, all of these things. So far, we're clear on that. So what would you say is the first ever public policy? And I've put clues in there for those of you who might be sort of history enthusiasts, might recognize some of the things I've put in there. But can you guys tell me what would you say would be the beginning of, and it doesn't have to be there, it could be something else entirely. Um, what comes to mind when you say the beginning of public policy in India or wherever in the world? The Magna Carta? Yeah, sure. What else? Anybody? Any other? All right. Okay. So let's see. The Magna Carta is there. I was hoping you'd be able to see the States of America sort of, yeah, the Constitution. But yeah, so public policy has been around for a really long time, right? And I can't say that um, it was the Code of Hammurabi, which was the beginning, or Magna Carta that was the beginning. We can't, it's very hard to pinpoint it. Or maybe it was the Chanakya Niti, or maybe it was something else. But the idea that the sometime in the earliest forms of organizations, right, earliest organization of society, we'd say that people recognize that if there was no checks and balances uh, on the sort of rights of the king, then it's going to sometimes go a bit too far, kind of a thing. So that was one of the things that was recognized fairly early. So in terms of what I have here, it's the Code of Hammurabi, which was enacted in ancient Babylon, and that established ideas of justice. What do we mean by justice, right? Or what does social order mean? So we're trying to define these really abstract concepts, and we're saying that yeah, so this is what we mean by it, or this is what we want to understand. This is how we define justice, or this is how we define social order, and this is how the property rights are going to be distributed, or labor, or family law. By the way, do you guys understand what property rights mean, and have a fair idea of what property rights, what I'm referring to when I say property rights? You could say yes, you could say no. Okay, thanks, Ishwari. Yes, so property rights, by property rights, I don't just mean land and property rights. I mean, if I have this phone and I have bought it, then it's my property. So I have a very clear definition of what is private property versus public property, those kind of things. So it's slightly more wider than just property rights, as referring to real estate. So all of that, how labor should be treated, or any of that, right? And then we have Magna Carta in England, of course, which said there has to be limits on the power of the monarch, because otherwise they're going to do as they wish, and that's not going to be okay, kind of a thing. That nobody is above law, and that's the only way human societies can work. Or the Edict of Milan, which put a stop to the persecution of Christians by the Romans. So somewhere we'd say that it was the beginning of what we today understand as human rights, that even if somebody is a prisoner of war, you can't just treat them really poorly. You have to treat them with dignity and respect, because they are a human being, and in their country they are a war hero. So so this idea of general dignity of life, kind of a thing. And democracy. I mean, and when I read like how gruesome some of the historical sort of narratives are, and it's the truth, right? Like, I don't know if, I mean, we don't know if it's the truth or not, but as they say in Nero used to burn Christians. I mean, the idea that there were slavery, or whenever you're looking at these really gruesome sort of acts of violence against people, against a whole community, you realize that you need laws and you need sort of ideas about how to govern the people and all of this. So with regards to democracy, again, America was founded on can Digital India be considered? Absolutely, absolutely. Digital India and Swachh Bharat Abhiyan both would be considered as part of public policy, and we'll come to that. Yes, GST is also any regulation that governs the behavior of public would be considered public policy. So yes. So America was founded on the assumption that people deserve to participate in the laws that they're making, right? And that is the whole concept of democracy, that if I'm being governed, then I need to have a say in what are the rules that are going to govern me. And if that is not being done, then it's colonization or slavery. Because if I don't have a say in who I elect as my leader, who I want to represent me, then it's really, I don't have a right to vote kind of a thing. And that's just colonialism or slavery, like I said. So yeah. And so public policy might have had like a really far off history, but the modern public policy, as we know, as a course, as a discipline, emerged in the 20th century. And why do you think that was? What happened in the 20th century that might have led to, and here when I say public policy, we are again referring to a very Western idea of public policy. We are referring to the US and the Western Europe, so to say. So what do you think happened in the 20th century that might have led to public policy gaining ground? Too far into history? World War. Good, yeah, good guess. Yes, World Wars. Yes, definitely. So, so yeah, that's what I've put up. That when something like COVID-19 or like a pandemic or World War, or when you're dealing with something that's a huge calamity, right? People tend as on a global scale, people tend to rethink what we're dealing with. So things like climate change, things like the COVID-19 pandemic or world wars, and we start questioning the status quo, right? So in terms of what the changes that COVID-19 brought in, or work from home, or do we really need to burn so much fuel and traveling from one place to another? And does that even make sense, spending 3 hours a day in commute when that work can be done very easily from home, or things like that? And also what happened during that time was bureaucracy was setting in. So governments became very complex, and you needed a very structured approach to solving problems, right? So that's what happened, and that's what led to the rise in public policy as such. So I'll give a very short American and European history, just one slide each, and then we'll move on to the current part of it. So after the 1930s, American sort of individualism, the idea of individualism took a really deep hit, right? So in your opinion, what are some of the key challenges that policymakers face today, and how can they be addressed? Okay, we'll get to that. It's a little off topic right now, so I will get to that. Actually, I have covered it in one of the slides, but in any case. So during the 1930s, the idea of individualism that kind of it changed from should governments help to how do governments help, that they needed to intervene when a whole country is in economic depression. the government needs to intervene. It needs to have an economic policy kind of a thing. So this idea, this change in idea, then led to the New Deal, which of course, a lot of you might know about, which introduced Social Security. Now they're getting rid of Social Security, which is a different story altogether. But this is what brought in the idea of Social Security. And a lot of people sort of got on board and were really happy. Like Democrats were happy and Republicans were happy. So it was a good rule as such. And then the idea of non-contributory social welfare programs came in. If for those of you who don't know what non-contributory social programs is, it's where aid is given to the poor who cannot contribute to the taxes. So it's very similar to when Bangalore fights that we are generating so much GDP, and then the center takes it all away and gives it to Bimaru states or the poorer districts in Karnataka. So that's not fair. So people in Bangalore or people in London or people in Dubai would be up in arms about it because they feel that they pay a lot more, they earn a lot more, and they deserve better parks, they deserve better roads, they deserve better transport. And that money shouldn't just be given to somebody who doesn't contribute to the taxes kind of a thing, right? So this is a very, again, still very contentious attribute of public policy, but yeah. And by the 1960s, this was the first time when somebody said that we need to wage a war on poverty. And poverty is such a sort of abstract notion, right? And waging a war on poverty was like, what do we mean by it? How do we go about it and all of that? So, and that kind of moved public policy from being an academic discipline to government offices, right? So once it moves to government offices, then you start having like think tanks and you start having consortia and you start having all of these the big fours that you have today, right? You start having these consulting firms which are coming in with subject matter experts to solve your problems, to sort of, the government is not able to address something, comes in somebody who is able to do it, kind of a thing. Again, very controversial topic, but that happened. And naturally, that led to a demand in the American universities when it started to be offered as a discipline, when they said we need to have courses on public policy because there's a lot of demand for public policy consultants, kind of a thing, right? So this was the American story. The European story is that, again, wars. So by 1942, Sir William Beveridge came up with the idea that there are 5 giant evils in society, and his evils were like there's want and disease and ignorance and squalor and idleness and all of this, right? So he came up with the idea of national insurance. National insurance is basically when you get paid for when you need something, when you want something, right? So pension, maternity allowance, disability allowance, job seeker allowance. So if you're in between jobs, you get paid in Europe. You also get paid in America, but yeah, job seeker allowance, bereavement, you are in mourning, or universal credit. So similarly for disease, they had free NHS, so everybody gets free healthcare, Canada, UK. Ignorance, so you have free education up to 16 years, even in India. Public housing, again, India followed a lot of those policies initially during the Nehruvian era. So yeah, and employment guarantee. We have Manrega even now, employment guarantee schemes, right? So these public policies that we see today have roots in like really long history of it, and lots of failures, lots of sort of revisions to get to where we are today. And after 1945, the idea of cradle to grave and sort of so that people can live with dignity and all of that. So you have support from the cradle till the grave, kind of a thing. And a variety of this, or a version of this, came about in almost every Western European country. And so the discipline of comparative public policy took hold, because you could very easily now compare France to Germany or Sweden to Denmark and say, okay, which one's doing better, which policy is doing better, and all of that. So you had that history and you had that comparability element, and so that led to a different subset of the discipline also. And again, in the 1970s and 80s, Margaret Thatcher, all of that, the privatization, which happened much later in India, and Tony Blair's third wave, which led to what we today know as evidence-based policy making, right? And a lot of you would have heard about evidence-based policy making, but this was the idea, that centrist idea, that we are neither going the entrepreneurial route or way. So when we say, forget this, when we say, I want India to progress, there can be multiple ways of how you imagine or how you envision that progress to happen. So that progress can happen by saying that everybody should have social security, everybody should have pension, everybody should be taken care of, they should have free education, free healthcare, all of these kind of things. So very leftist ideas. Or it could happen in a very right-wing kind of way, where you're saying, you should sort of give impetus to entrepreneurship, give impetus to businesses, and that should create the demand and all of that. So it can happen either way. And I think what it's about ideology, right? And there's no right or wrong here. It's just about ideology, and which government comes in and what their ideology is about how they envision the progress of the country, kind of a thing. So Tony Blair's way was the third way, which was meeting social justice with economic efficiency, so increased investment in education and healthcare with market-oriented reforms. And that's where the idea of markets for poor came in. So that history kind of gives us an idea about what the characteristics of public policy is. So it has to have democratic ethos, that we understood, that every citizen needs to have a say with regards to the policies that govern them, right? It is distinctively multidisciplinary. So everyone, like I say, when just about every field can have a say in public policy, kind of a thing, because it concerns us as citizens. But I want you to I want you to tell me, what do I mean by problem-oriented and what do I mean by value-oriented? Or what do you understand by that? When I say public policy is distinctly problem-oriented, what am I saying? You can unmute yourself and speak as well. Okay, instrumental rationality, not here exactly, but why do you say instrumental rationality? It is a very important point in public policy. But Ishwari, can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, ma'am. When you just said about public policy being problem-oriented, I was just reminded of, I'm a sociology graduate, so I just got reminded of Weber's instrumental rationality. So that is how, now in the next point, you have made it clear by objectivism, by elaborating on objectivism. So maybe I was just helping you out here.
Yeah, but it's a good point. It's a good point. Sorry? Oh, yeah. It's a good point that you, I think, Christian? Yeah. So problem-oriented can be, yes. Yes, Chetan, that it is very context-specific in the sense that we are not like how physicians study the space for or matter for just the knowledge for knowledge sake. That is something that's very common in academia. And it's not so common in vocational courses like engineering or medicine or things like that. It's not common because we are looking at a very specific thing, right? We're not just studying knowledge for knowledge sake kind of a thing. And that's, again, something very specific to public policy, that we are looking at problem-oriented, that we have a problem to solve. This is how we are defining the problem. This is the context in which the problem exists. And now let's figure out how to solve it, kind of a thing. So yeah, that. And value-oriented is where we are saying that irrespective of how we define objectivity, just the fact that we want to be objective means that it's not going to be value-free, that it is loaded, and ideology comes in public policy, because there's only a point up to which economics can answer. After that, it's just a valued decision that you're taking. So economics only gets you so far, and after that, you're making an intuitive ideology-based decision about how to go about it, kind of a thing. So that's what I mean by value-oriented. I've put 100 guitars problem. Are you aware of the 100 guitars problem? I don't know. It's a very classic philosophy sort of issue. When you say let's say there are only 100 guitars in the world, and you are in possession of all 100 guitars, and you now get to decide who gets the guitar. So then, are you going to give it to somebody who can play well? Are you going to give it to somebody who really, really, really wants it? Or are you going to give it to somebody who needs it, kind of a thing? So, or somebody who can pay for it, kind of a thing. So all of these are anything you choose, right? Any which way, even if you choose that I'm going to divide it into 25 guitars and I'm going to give 25 to somebody who really needs it, 25 to somebody who can play really well, and 25 to somebody who can buy, and however you divide it, whatever your rationale is going to be, there's going to be an ideology behind that rationale, and there's going to be a decision that's not completely objective, kind of a thing. And that's what we say in terms of public policy. So in terms of the policy process, the first and the most important of all of this is actually defining the problem. Because if you have defined the problem wrong, it's like a doctor not diagnosing the problem well and then starting a treatment. So unless you have a good diagnosis, unless you've defined your problem really, really well, your solution is going to be not as effective. So when we talk about the slums, right, you can define the slum as a place of crime infested. You can define the slum as being very entrepreneurial and jugadu, right? So if I define the slum as a crime-infested place, then it is going to be like the Brazilian favelas, that I'm going to, if that's how I've defined my problem, then my solution is going to be, I'm going to install paramilitary force in the favelas 24/7. That's going to be my solution. If I'm looking at the slums of Dharavi as being entrepreneurial, then I'm going to pump in money. Then I'm going to go there scouting for my resource. Like I'm going to go look for extra film actors or this or that or any of it, right? Because I see them as being jugadu. So it a lot depends on how I'm defining the problem, kind of a thing. And for that, I'm going to do empirical research. I'm going to get expert opinion. I'm going to look at best practices, and I'm going to get public input on it. And then, of course, I design the program, we implement the program, we do monitoring and evaluation, we get a feedback loop, and then we revise and repeat the whole process. So this is an ideal process. But in between this ideal process, what happens is 3 years are up or 5 years are up, and the new election comes in, and the old program was called by some name, and now we can't have that program running because people identify it with the earlier government. So we can't have that program running. So we're going to change it, and we're going to redefine the whole thing and all of that. So ideally, this should happen, but oftentimes it doesn't happen, right? That's something that we need to keep in mind. So somebody had asked me, what are some of the key challenges policymakers face today? And I think continuity of public policies is something that policymakers really, really, that's a challenge that a lot of policymakers face today. Because no matter what happens, democracy underpins very short-term development. What I mean by that is I'm not going to be that interested in a 20-year vision because my public can't see it. My public needs for me to construct something that can be shown in like 3 years. And so I'm less interested in undertaking massive urban development, which takes up a huge chunk of budget. I would rather just construct houses for the underprivileged, because then the houses get constructed in 3 years. I can have a Bhumi Pujan, I can hand over the keys in like 3-5 years time, and I have started something just as I got elected, and I can hand over something just as the new election is coming up, kind of a thing. So democracy then underpins sort of short-term thinking, short-term development, where I'm saying that that's the kind of public policy, because I can't have a vision for 20 years, because if I start something and the new government isn't willing to continue with that, then it's not going to be very useful, per se. With regards to why everyone should concern themselves with public policy or policy analysis, what do you think? Why should I'm going to ask this question again. So I think I'll take your answers in a bit, but one is that whatever policy environment comes in, all of us need to exist in there. So if it is not working for me, if it's not furthering my cause, if it's not working for me, then how do I go about changing it? So I need to figure out, is it working for me, kind of a thing. Yeah, absolutely, Chetan. Why don't we make it independent? Because every government that comes has a say in how the budget is going to be spent. And if a leftist government comes in, they might not be thinking of businesses as something that needs investment. Maybe they are thinking of education and healthcare as priorities. And if a right-wing government comes in, maybe they don't see pensions as important, and maybe they see entrepreneurship as something really important. So priorities are dependent on ideologies, and ideologies then sort of set priorities. So but some things like Aadhaar card that stayed irrespective of the political parties coming in, because those kind of things. So the idea is, why do I need to analyze the public policy? Because I need to know that if a new policy comes in, if a new tech policy comes in, if a new greenhouse policy comes in, or anything like that, I'm buying a new car, right? I'm making a decision based on, should I buy an EV? Should I buy a petrol car? What's going to happen? All of these decisions I'm making, right? What's the cost? Will I be able to sell my petrol car later? All of these things, right? So depending on what the policy comes in, because if they're going to stop the production of petrol cars, then maybe I shouldn't be buying a petrol car, and all of those things. And if it's not working for me, how do I go about changing it? So I'm not a very popular person. So tomorrow, if I go and stand in the market square and start protesting against something, I'm not going to have like 10,000 people support me. So is it even worth it? Is it even worth sort of opposing it? All of these are sort of self-negating thoughts that are going to come in, and I need to figure out ways of finding support groups, finding people who think along the same lines, and then evaluating my decision and making a cost-benefit analysis of how much time and energy do I put into it, and all of this, right? So again, policy affects everything, so it's really, really important that we pay attention to it. So then, if analyzing policy is really important, how do we go about analyzing policy, right? So policy analysis provides a very structured sort of approach to understanding policy. So how does one go about doing it? Is first I'm going to say, is it fulfilling or furthering the set goals? And set goals is whatever the policy was established for, is it doing that? So when I'm a food critic and I am going to a restaurant and I'm looking at pav bhaji, what I'm going to look at is it a good pav bhaji? That's what I'm going to look at, right? I'm not going to look at why it's not masala dosa, right? So is it doing what it's supposed to do? Is it what it is supposed to be? But then I can question that, should we be even serving pav bhaji during lunch, kind of a thing? So then my next question becomes, are the set goals even worth pursuing? Should we have different set of goals, kind of a thing? So then once I do that, then I have to question who gets to gain, who is the loser here in this policy, who's getting richer. And when I do that, I have to also look at, to what extent are they getting richer, and to what extent are the poorer getting poorer? What are the unintended consequences of a set policy? And there are a lot of unintended consequences, right? For example, if we were working on a policy on housing and real estate, and making housing and real estate more transparent. So I was part of the commission that came up with RERA and all of that. But did you know that in trying to make housing more transparent, which means getting all the papers, getting all of that, the real estate prices shot up by like 20-30%, if it's RERA approved, kind of a thing, because that's the cost of regulation. So that was an unintended consequence, because it made housing unaffordable. And nobody wanted to make housing unaffordable. It's just that they were trying to make the process more transparent. And in doing so, the unintended consequence was that housing became more unaffordable. So was there transparency and accountability in the policymaking process, or was it that quid pro quo? You supported me, so I'm going to give back to your community. This community supported me, so I'm going to have policies for that community. Is it more like quid pro quo and clientelist policies, or is it fair and transparent and all of that, right? So we're looking at the policymaking process. And that brings us to what we understand as evidence-based policymaking, kind of a thing. So, and evidence-based policymaking is very simple. The idea that policies should be ideology-free. Easier said than done, but it should not be based on common sense or intuition or just expert opinion or things like that. It should be based on objective evidence. That's the whole point of evidence-based policy. So then what constitutes evidence, right? Like, yeah. So then they use like logical, yeah, yeah. So it's much harder than what you think. Yes, data, definitely. But what kind of data, Ishwari? Because see, when we say facts don't speak for themselves, you know what I mean? There might be a case where all the data, all the facts say that somebody is guilty, and then that party is not behind bars, or is kind of let go or free. So these things happen. And what I mean here, or what I'm trying to say, is that facts don't necessarily speak for themselves, because facts are also constructed and manufactured, because yeah, we'll come to that, agenda setting and all of that. But basically, randomized controlled trials are very good. Good data, analytical skills, political support for using scientific information, all of these are part of evidence-based policy making, right? And here, I can't show this because this is like an hour-long thing, but I'll send it across to you. And if any of you are interested, do watch it. What he's trying to say is, how do you decide whether 75 billion, if that's my budget, 75 billion should be spent on midday meals, or it should be spent on improving agricultural output? Should I spend on this, or should I spend on that? How do I decide? How does a government prioritize what it is that they should be spending on? And that, the process of that is what he's talking about. And the parameters and the indicators and how they go about doing it. It's a really, I mean, Google Docs are really good anyways, but this is an especially good talk. But this idea of effective altruism is something that's catching on, and a lot of people are getting on board with this idea. And it's about putting in all of the world's efforts into solving most pressing problems. So let's not solve 10,000 problems. Let's identify the 100 most pressing problems and let's get all funding to it. So that's the idea of effective altruism. And it's gaining a lot of ground, it's gaining a lot of funding, and all of these things matter, right? So I might have a really, really good idea on making music accessible to everyone, but I won't get funding for it because a lot of people might not think that it's very effective. So all of these things depend on how people see or view priorities, right? Sorry, it just started. And in terms of the difficulties for evidence-based policy making, we have the idea of insufficient or unreliable data, conflicting evidence, political bias, complexities of issues, because again, poverty or world hunger, these are very wicked problems with so many factors, so many stakeholders, and all of that. So these are quite complicated issues. Limited capacity for analysis, rational ignorance. Rational ignorance is again what I was saying, that I don't think this policy should come in. But I also know that if I go and stand at Market Square and try and oppose people, nobody's going to support me. So I say that, well, my time is better spent trying to focus on my child's education or grading my students' reports, something that would bring immediate sort of response. And so that's how I know that this is important. I know voting is really important, but I feel like it's not going to make a lot of change this way or that. So my mind is rationally choosing to ignore really important decisions at my own peril, but that peril is going to come a long way down the line. So I might know that driving a car is bad or flying airplanes is bad, but everybody is flying, so I'm ignoring that, and I continue doing that because, yeah, rational ignorance kind of a thing. So now, can you tell me what are some of the emerging areas for public policy? I'm trying to sort of give like 10 minutes time so that I can take up your questions and all of that. So yeah. When you think of emerging areas of public policy, what comes to mind? What's new? What's I've just put in the areas in the next slide because I want to show the wide variety of things that can have a public policy on. Data analysis, it's a methodology, but yes, you could have a policy on that saying, how do you keep data or where do you keep data or things like that. But climate change, yes, definitely. Artificial intelligence, yes. God, yes. Like the ozone layer one, yeah. Fintech, yes. Cybersecurity, yeah, good. Gender inclusion, yes, definitely. Quantum computing, oh, good, awesome. So you're going to be one of the subject matter experts. Mental health, definitely mental health. Yeah. Accountability. Yeah. And accountability is so weird because even our accounting systems are so different in India and in US and UK and all of that, that our accounting systems are from the 20th century. And most of our MNCs are making money, like Facebook is making money in India, but not paying taxes in India because it's not established in India. So then Our accounting systems are of the 20th century, but ideally, Facebook should be giving money to the Indian government or the UK government, but they don't pay taxes in India or the UK because they're not established. Their physical presence is not there in the UK or in India, kind of a thing. So our accounting, I mean, I know you meant by accountability, you meant a bigger idea, but it just got me into this internet content creation. Yes, definitely. We need rules again, yeah, for that. Yeah, so this idea of having rules is because initial emerging areas, right? We don't make rules because we don't know the contours of how big it is or what the problems are. So we don't make rules for that. Once it has come up and we have a fairly good idea of it, then we can make some rules about it. So then it makes sense to have some rules about it, kind of a thing, when we know some of the issues with it. Circular economy, definitely, definitely. Intellectual property with regards to like things like chat GPT, right? With chat GPT, if chat GPT is writing, and did you know that Elsevier is listing chat GPT as one of the co-authors? So you can co-author with chat GPT and send it to Elsevier, and they will publish it as co-authored by chat GPT. So you can cut paste the whole essay, put it in chat GPT, tell ChatGPT to paraphrase it, and then you can put it as, no, I'm simplifying it, but I'm oversimplifying it just for the humor part of it. But yes, it is listing it as a co-author. So yeah, intellectual property rights is a big issue. So yeah, a lot of things that you said are already here: climate change, healthcare, cybersecurity, cyber-physical systems. Cyber-physical systems are those that are capable of making decisions and operating independently. For example, automated cars. So if an accident happens, whose fault is it? Who's to be blamed? All of these things are is the company to be blamed because it was a faulty wiring, or is the person who was sitting in the car to be blamed? All of these things, right? Energy security, definitely. Mental health, space exploration. Did you know there's a whole issue of debris around the globe because we have sent so many satellites and up in this, not by we, I mean we as humans have sent so much that now the space is full of debris and that needs to be cleaned up, which is a very expensive proposition. But cryptocurrencies, blockchains, and augmented and virtual realities, smart cities, and biotechnology, and digital infrastructure, circular economy, all of these things, aging population. With regards to aging population, what do? You can't just kick them out of the house and just ask them to go live wherever. They will need healthcare. They will need if they want to be traveling independently, then you need buses that can carry people who are traveling in wheelchairs, or you need larger boards so that they can read those boards. All of this is like an investment into urban infrastructure, right? And as your demographic is changing, how long are you going to pay pensions? And all of these are decisions that you need to make. So we need policies around that. Yeah, definitely. And this gives us an idea about how sort of wide the scope of public policy is, that it doesn't have to be for public policy students or economists. It can be for anyone who is willing to be a subject matter specialist and willing to work in that area and wanting to shape that area or that sector, right? And that's important because the policies we make today tend to have what we know as institutional inertia. Again, I took these cases because why did only Pune or Bangalore became a tech hub? Why didn't Hubli become a tech hub? Or why wasn't Dharwad a tech hub? Or why isn't Chandigarh a tech hub? So these kind of things, when we're looking at these kind of things, we know that some things happened here. Some people thought of putting engineering colleges here, or some people thought of establishing that there is arid ground, and to make that arid ground into usable ground, they created these SEZs, sort of areas where tech companies came in and invested, and they were given a tax vacation for 30 years. So all of these things kind of led to cities developing and contributing so highly to GDP and all of that. Similarly, why they grow wheat in Punjab. So, for example, when the Britishers came, they wanted bread, and the wheat wasn't grown traditionally in Punjab, and they just chose Punjab because the kind of they were experimenting with different kinds of taxation systems. So Mahalwari system in some place, Rayatwari system in another place, and Zamindari system in another place, and different kinds of systems. So in Bengal, they had Zamindari system wherein the taxation wouldn't change for 30 years. So they weren't interested in investing, in making investments there. But in Punjab, they had a kind of taxation system where the taxation was dependent on the produce. So they invested in canals and all of that. And so when Green Revolution happened, suddenly Punjab also took off, kind of a thing, because these investments were already made. And these kind of things that institutional inertia gives in is what shapes the society in the long run. So the decisions we are making today is not just for today, but it is in the long run, in the next 20 years, 40 years of your career. What's going to be important? You are going to be the makers and shapers of tomorrow, right? So yeah, it's in your hands to make these rules and come up with all of these rules and all of that. So why did India develop as a services hub while China became a manufacturing hub? And yeah. And I'm going to end here. So this is something that I saw today. It's come in today's paper. And this is by Hasmukh Adia. He was a former finance secretary, government of India, and it's his personal views. But if he's talking about how India needs a policy education, right? It's really important to make public policy part of school education, part of university education, that everybody should have a sort of common base knowledge about public policy, kind of a thing. And he's saying that public administration should be a compulsory paper for UPSC exams. At least those who are bureaucrats should know about it, kind of a thing. So yeah, this is an interesting read. And so they used to say war is too important to leave those decisions to the generals. And from there, it became economics is too important to be left to economists. And I extended to public policy, that public policy is too important to be left to policy analysts. And I think everyone should be concerned. But could you tell me, after this short longish talk of mine, why do you think everyone should concern themselves with public policy? Well, what's your takeaway? Yeah, this is my last slide. So what's your takeaway with regards to why should everyone concern themselves with public policy? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And see, the thing is, if you think STEM is important, right? So you will have to speak up that STEM is important, STEM education is important. If you think computing is important, you will have to speak up that computing is important, right? Or it'll have to speak for itself by making money. But what happens is if there are no advocates for something, then the problems in those areas are never going to be addressed. It's only when the public is saying that this is a problem, it's only then that it gets the needed mileage, the needed sort of clout for it to become a public problem, and then for it to be addressed, kind of a thing. Absolutely, it affects and shapes our day-to-day life and molds further generations' future, and that's a responsibility on us. Absolutely, systemic response to government issues, definitely. And this idea that that if I say it's not, like if I tomorrow say that the interest rate that the banks are having, it's not my issue, I can't say it. I mean, I might not be able to do a lot about it, but if the business community comes together and says the taxation is really high, they do lower the taxes. If the sort of tech companies, big giants, come in and say that, like, we need this to be changed, or so this idea that we need public to be informed of what is happening with regards to the rules that are actually governing them. So yeah, definitely. Going back to the one question that was there, Kalpana was asking, what are the key challenges that some of the policymakers face today and how can they be addressed? I don't know if Kalpana is here. But for others, I can address this idea that I think one of the key challenges that people face is with regards to identifying the problem. So I work in informal economy, right? But if you ask me what are the top 3 problems in the informal economy today, I wouldn't be able to sort of give you on the top of my head. So that's the kind of thing. And even if I know that there is issues with skilling and issues with training and all of that, it's very hard for us to define the problems and go about solving them and sort of bringing about policies with regards to them. What advice would you give to young professionals looking to pursue a career in public policy? I think the most important thing is finding a sector which you really care about. Are you interested in tech? Are you interested in education? Are you interested in healthcare? Are you interested in finance? Are you interested? So what is it that really excites you? Like, not seeing it as a drag, but seeing it as something that you really care about, that you really are excited about. And once you find that, then the rest of it comes easy, because there's always going to be space for people to work in public policy if and when they're good at it, right? And for them to be good at it, it needs to be something that they're interested in. So I would say even a sort of basic knowledge of public policy and how policy analysis is done is good enough. What is more important is that you really understand your sector. So if you are into tech, if you are into cryptocurrencies, if you are into Bitcoin, what is it that you are into, by the way? Prangan?
Ma'am, I'm from energy background. Yeah. Hello.
Yeah.
Yes,
I can hear
ma'am,
you.
I'm from energy background, and I'm quite interested in bioenergy policies,
Yeah.
throughout the worldwide. Yes, ma'am. So recently, I have done few preliminary works on bioenergy policy of the different countries, like including India. So yes, but that's not my core area. That is one of my but I'm interested into
Interest
bioenergy
areas.
policies. Yes,
Interest areas. Yeah. So this idea that because you're interested in it, the natural curiosity that you want to know more about it, know more about how to solve this, what are the problems in it, because unless you know your sector inside and out, you will not be able to identify what are the kind of key core issues in that sector, kind of a thing. So when I'm talking about biofuel, why isn't it becoming mainstream, or is it even becoming mainstream, or what are the constraints that's stopping it from becoming mainstream? When I'm looking at these kind of questions, it's very important that I have a thorough understanding of the sector. So I think that would be my advice. So yeah, dig deeper into your sector rather than being a generalist of sorts, I would say. Can you discuss some of the ethical constraints? Yeah. Because yes. And do you know there's a term for it, Chetan? It's called the tyranny of the majority. Tyranny of the majority is what happens in democracy, because if there's like 51% of the people who agree for something, then the 49% of the people will have to adhere to that. And that's the tyranny of the majority in a democracy. So no matter what happens, this idea that the minorities' voices don't get heard is actually true. And it's true because unless there is special sort of considerations for them, yeah, it's always going to be the majority voice that's loud and clear and that gets accepted because it's the 51% rule, right? Yeah. But that's not the only ethical, that is a big consideration, ethical consideration, definitely. So it need not just be with caste or religion or things like that, even gender. There are so many times when we're making policies for women, and in the board you will see all men sitting there. So yeah, I mean, it happens in a lot of places that people to whom these policies affect the most will not be considered in the, you know, the ones who are making the judgment calls about whether or not there should be a policy for poverty are usually never poor. So that's the kind of thing. So somebody who's rich and well educated and in a good position is making a value judgment and a decision about what should or should not constitute poverty, or how poverty should be treated, and all of that, without being able to empathize what it feels like to be in their shoes, kind of a thing. So yeah, and that's not the only issue, because evidence-based policy making, right? We're talking about evidence-based policy making, but what is evidence? Evidence gets collected on whatever was the agenda. So if the research agenda, for example, ESRC sets out that this year we are going to be funding these 7 major areas, then evidence is going to get collected on those 7 major areas, right? And what evidence and what research gets done, or what research gets funding on, is what evidence is available, right? So even at the agenda setting level, we already know that whatever we have data on is what is being funded right now. And whether it's being funded by pharmacies, whether it's being funded by large corporations, whether it's being funded by sort of interest groups, these are the things that we have a lot of data on, and that is problematic in itself, in and of itself. Yeah. So the effective strategy can be taking the ratios per community, basically normalizing. Yeah, that's a very effective strategy, but only on paper, because the thing is, did you know that before 2010, there was no slum survey? Because surveys cost money, and even in 2010, when the first slum survey happened, it was an estimate. It was a slum estimate. It wasn't like a census survey kind of a thing, because actually taking people's opinion into consideration is a very expensive endeavor. So that's why we kind of sort of elect political leaders who should be representing us, kind of a thing, right? So they represent our interest, kind of a thing. But yes, that is an effective, like on paper, it would be a very effective strategy. It's just really hard to do it because it costs a lot of money, unfortunately. And the thing is, when you're spending on something, would you rather tell the poor that, okay, you're not going to be getting hand pumps because we're doing a survey, and after the survey, we're going to come up with policies which are going to be really effective in the long run, so you can't get hand pumps in the short run? Yeah, that's the kind of decisions. So in public policy, like we say, there are no A and B decisions. There is like D and F minus decision that you're going to have. But I'm painting a fairly pessimistic picture, which need not be the case, to be honest. There are lots of exciting areas which have lots of promising policies that have come up, which encourage entrepreneurship among the young. And yeah, so it need not always be pessimistic, but definitely a lot of ethical considerations, yes. Any other questions? Yeah, looks like we're good.
Okay. Yeah. So that brings to the end of the session. And on behalf of Students Academic Board, I would like to extend our sincere thanks to Dr. Padmini for delivering an insightful webinar on public policy. Your expertise and experience have provided us a valuable learning opportunity, and we are grateful for your time and effort in preparing as well as delivering this informative session. We would also like to express our special thanks to Parvati for her outstanding support in organizing and coordinating this webinar. And at the end, we definitely thanks all our participants who joined us today. Once again,
Yeah.
thank you, ma'am, for your time and expertise.
Thank you so much. It was really lovely for me. I mean, this is a excellent way to spend my Friday evening, and definitely was the highlight. Like today, since morning, I was kind of looking at all of this and going through all the meetings, and I was thinking, yeah, I can talk about this point in the call in the evening, and I can talk about this or that and all of that, and. You guys have been such a lovely audience. Thank you so much. And if any of you are in Bangalore, or just hit me up on LinkedIn, or yeah, if you're in Bangalore, just give me a call. We could grab some coffee or something like that. Yeah, it would be lovely to see you all. Good luck with your course. Good luck with your exams and everything. And have fun.
Yeah,
Thank you all. Thank
definitely. Thank you,
you.
ma'am.
Thank you. Bye.